It's called a yard bean because these beans are supposed to get to about a yard long. As you can see, it's pretty long as it is. It's not quite a yard, but it's definitely around 2 feet, at least that one. The vine itself seems to be dying back, so I don't really think that I'm going to get much more. Look at that. Into the pond for the toads. So it doesn't look like it's gonna put out too many more of these beans. You can see there's a bunch back there. I don't know if you can see that on there. So I'm gonna get beans for next year. These have climatized over. This plant, this particular vine really took a long time to really get started. It didn't really start coming up out of this. It was growing, but it was like a little tiny little, maybe the first week in August, it started to, all of a sudden a vine started coming up out of it and climbed its way out of there. You know, by then all the growth from all this other stuff was just getting too big for it. And I thought it would just grow like a regular, you know, bean plant, but it took a while for this plant to actually come up. So if you plant this vine, make sure you plant it in a very sunny location, kind of separated from everything else. Give it a little bit of shade though. Give it some either morning shade or afternoon shade. I would say give it some morning shade. Get that main heat of the day off the plant. Think that the heat may have had something to do with it not wanting to come up, because it knew if it came up it would just get burned off. So I don't really know. I just would say this vine, out of all the bean plants, this particular bean plant really wasn't aggressive at all. It took a while for it to come up. When it came up, it kind of sprawled out a little bit, and I think you really need to grow this thing on its own little vine thing, which I'm going to do next year. Some of my grapevines didn't cover my grape trellises yet, so I'm going to plant these beans on one side of the grape trellis where the grapes aren't, and I'm going to let these grow along those grape trellises right in the middle of the yard where it gets pretty much all sun, and we'll see what happens in that particular case. See if it becomes more aggressive that way or if it just dies. So I'll just give you a heads up that that might be a problem if you're growing these beans in an area where something else might grow around it and kind of shade it out. It just normally for me, even if something's starting to shade out my beans, they become aggressive and throw up a couple runners, and they really start growing past all the other growth, usually very quickly, and start covering everything. This one didn't want to do that. This one just sat down there for a while, wasn't dying, wasn't sick or anything. It just stayed there for the longest time, and then it came up and it started doing this. So I figured I'd show you this because I'm gonna start harvesting these beans, and I'm gonna get these ready for next year. We'll do another video on this, on these climatized beans, to see if there's any significant difference in their growing pattern between this year and next year. So I'll link the videos together so you can go back and forth and kind of see the difference in growth and the behavior of the plant and everything. See if it made that much of a difference. I'm pretty confident it does. Usually 9 out of 10 times a climatized seed always becomes very aggressive in that new environment. Even 1 year later, it could be 2 years later, 3 years later. Like tomatoes sometimes take like a good 2 years to really climatize right, you know. And once they grow in that environment for a while, then they really become aggressive. Like you can see a lot of these tomato plants are 3-4 years old or so, give and take, you know. And the aggressive nature of these plants now are actually becoming invasive. Whereas I'd never really considered that to be a reality, but it can happen, and plants will adjust to their environment, which is good and bad. So I mean, you can't let things go out of control like this. Like I let this go out of control, I'm going to pay the price next year, because you could see over there all the tomatoes, all those little Everglade tomatoes are all over the place again. I tried picking them up. There's so many of them, they're literally all over the place. Look, I got tomatoes on the ground everywhere. I mean, there's just literally, you know, I should be eating them. It's just, you can only eat so many of these things. You know, I mean, I don't know. You get sick of them after a while. We'll grow these out next year. I'll get the beans from this, and we will see if we can get the full 3-foot beans out of it. I have seen these beans. They get unbelievably long. It's almost a freaky thing to see, because they're so long. It's like, what is that thing, you know? It's very interesting. I want to get the full 3 feet, but the growing environment definitely has to change. This year was kind of a flip-flop for a lot of stuff. So All right, so that's your yard beans. Maybe give this bean a try. You might like this. See you guys in the next one.